The story opens inside a sprawling mansion that gleams with marble floors, chandeliers, and luxury at every turn. Yet, despite the glitter of wealth, a heavy shadow looms. The young heir, Ethan, son of one of the world's most powerful billionaires, has sunk into despair following the sudden death of his mother. Once known as a spirited and kind boy, Ethan now isolates himself, refusing food, neglecting his studies, and shutting himself away from friends. His father, Richard Hamilton, though successful in business, struggles to reach his son emotionally. Richard believes money can solve problems, so he hires expensive therapists, buys Ethan rare gifts, and even arranges extravagant trips, but nothing works. Ethan remains unmoved, drowning silently in grief. The mansion, though filled with people, feels empty. Grace, a middle-aged black woman with kind but weary eyes, enters the Hamilton household as a maid. She has lived a hard life, raising children on her own, working tirelessly to make ends meet. Unlike the polished servants who keep their distance, Grace carries herself with quiet dignity, warmth, and resilience. She doesn't flinch at the opulence around her, nor is she intimidated by the billionaire's presence. On her first day, she notices Ethan sitting alone in the garden, staring blankly at the roses his mother once adored. Other staff members whisper about the boy's depression, advising Grace not to interfere. But something in Ethan's hollow gaze touches her deeply, reminding her of her own son who had once struggled with hopelessness. Though hired to clean and serve, Grace feels a silent calling to reach him. Unlike others, Grace does not force conversation or smother Ethan with sympathy. Instead, she begins with small, genuine gestures, leaving his favorite cookies outside his door, quietly humming lullabies in the kitchen, or watering the roses when he sits nearby. Slowly, Ethan begins to notice her presence. One afternoon, when Grace finds him silently sketching his late mother's portrait, she doesn't praise or pity him. Instead, she softly says, "She must have been a beautiful soul. You've captured love in her eyes." For the first time in weeks, Ethan responds, a single nod, but it carries weight. This subtle acknowledgement marks the fragile beginning of their bond. Grace understands grief not as a wound to be fixed, but as something to be honored. And Ethan senses, perhaps unconsciously, that she sees him not as the billionaire's son, but as a grieving child. Richard Hamilton, consumed by business meetings and social appearances, notices the shift. He sees Ethan spending time with Grace and feels unsettled. In Richard's world, status defines relationships. He cannot fathom why his son would confide in a maid when the best doctors are available. One evening, he confronts Ethan. "Son, you deserve the finest care, not comfort from the help." Ethan, usually silent, erupts in rare defiance. "She listens to me. She doesn't treat me like I'm broken." This argument shocks Richard, who cannot understand love unmeasured by wealth. For Grace, the confrontation is risky. Her job and livelihood hang in the balance. Yet, she stands firm in her quiet role, believing her purpose transcends cleaning floors. The clash between father and maid foreshadows the deeper conflict of the story. The difference between love rooted in humanity versus love wrapped in materialism. One rainy evening, when thunder rattles the mansion, Ethan admits he is haunted by dreams of his mother. Grace, instead of offering hollow reassurances, shares her own story. She tells Ethan of losing her husband at a young age, of raising her children alone, of nights spent praying they wouldn't go hungry. Her voice does not tremble with self-pity. Rather, it carries strength born from suffering. Ethan, for the first time, feels less alone. His grief, though still heavy, begins to merge with an understanding. Pain is universal, not exclusive to him. Grace also encourages Ethan to express his emotions through art and writing. "Words heal," she tells him, placing a notebook on his desk. These simple, heartfelt gestures provide Ethan with a path forward, not to erase grief, but to live with it. Grace notices Ethan sketching more often, his pages filled with images of his mother, memories, and even abstract reflections of sorrow. With her encouragement, Ethan begins transforming his sketches into a small project, a memory book dedicated to his mother. They work quietly together, Ethan drawing, Grace helping him write captions and organize stories. This project becomes their shared secret, hidden from Richard and the rest of the household. For Ethan, it's not just about remembering his mother, but about reclaiming his identity and voice. For Grace, it's about teaching him resilience through creation, not destruction. The book grows into a testament of love, healing, and remembrance. And in nurturing Ethan's spirit, Grace becomes like the motherly figure he thought he had lost forever. Richard eventually discovers the memory book. At first, he is furious, not at Ethan but at Grace. "You had no right to meddle," he accuses, his pride wounded by the thought that a maid succeeded where he failed. But when he flips through the pages, his anger fades. He sees not only his late wife's face but also his son's pain, written in trembling words and tender sketches. For the first time, Richard realizes he has been blind, mistaking luxury for love, mistaking provision for presence. His son didn't need a billionaire's solutions. He needed a human connection. In a moment of humility, Richard approaches Grace privately, asking how he can truly be there for Ethan. Grace, without bitterness, replies simply, "Start by listening." With Grace's guidance, Richard begins to rebuild his relationship with Ethan. He sets aside his endless meetings to spend time with his son, not in boardrooms or exotic resorts, but in the garden where his wife once planted roses. Together, the three of them, Billionaire, son, and Maid, nurture the roses, symbolizing the slow rebirth of hope. Richard begins to see Grace not as the help, but as a mentor, even a healer. Ethan, though still scarred by grief, learns that loss does not mean abandonment. Love remains in memories, in gestures, and in the people who care. Slowly, laughter returns to the mansion, not the hollow laughter of social gatherings, but the genuine kind that springs from healing hearts. Months pass, and Ethan emerges from his depression. He returns to school, though cautiously, carrying his memory book as a source of strength. He still misses his mother deeply, but the despair no longer consumes him. Grace's presence has given him resilience, while his father's awakening has restored trust. The boy who once locked himself away now speaks openly about his mother, even smiling when sharing her stories. Richard, too, transforms, from a man enslaved to wealth and image into a father learning humility, empathy, and presence. The mansion, once a gilded cage of sorrow, now breathes with warmth. Grace, still a maid by title, has in truth become the pillar of the household. The story closes with Ethan presenting a finished version of the memory book, bound and beautiful, to his father. On the first page, he dedicates it not only to his mother but also to Grace, writing, "For the love that heals, even in silence." Richard, moved to tears, embraces both his son and Grace, the woman who restored their broken family. The final image is of the three standing together in the rose garden, petals falling like blessings from the heavens. Wealth, grief, and status fade into the background. What remains is love, pure and enduring. Grace's quiet act, born from empathy and humanity, became the turning point that changed everything, proving that healing often comes not from riches, but from the simple presence of a heart that truly cares.